Welcome, everybody. Glad to have you. Going to dive into a new series this morning called Grace for All. We're going to talk about who is invited to faith in Jesus and the nature of the church and who's in and who's out. Like, how do we determine and where is that line? In the last couple of weeks, two men of relative renown in the American church have passed away. First one, and you might know one or you might know both, depending on which side of the tracks you grew up on. You might know one of these guys. One was Jimmy Swaggart, who was a renowned evangelist in the 70s, 80s, into the 90s, would fill stadiums in the United States with his preaching, would fill stadiums in South America and in South Africa, and eventually lost most of his public ministry to a kind of a self-driven public scandal. And his response to that, it's like almost everything, the cover-up is almost as bad or worse than what actually occurred. And they didn't walk that out very well, and he kind of faded from public view. He passed away. Another one recently was John MacArthur, was a renowned Bible teacher, did not have any of those personal scandals like Swaggart did, but was accused a number of times of really harsh treatment of other people and had his own issues, as many people do. Now, these two were not close. They were very, very different. They really didn't care for one another, and they were very vocal about their disdain for the other camp. The two probably wouldn't have gone out for coffee. It might have gotten hostile, okay? Now, we don't know, but we assume that both of these men were right with the Lord when they passed. They both certainly understood grace. Grace is an amazing thing, and both these guys understood that. But a pastor friend of mine this week mentioned, imagine the shock of these two when they arrived in the receiving area of heaven to find each other there. You're here? You're here? We're not much different. We know we're broken, and we know there's no good thing in us. Nobody's here right now trumpeting your inner goodness, yet we still think we're a little better off than somebody else. And most of us, when we get to heaven, will be side-eyeing somebody, going, I just didn't anticipate. And there will be people side-eyeing us, saying, I didn't anticipate that. How does this all relate to the nature of the church? The question of who's in, who's out, and who decides. Before we get too far into this, I want to read 4 short scriptures. And as we read these, I want you to consider how inclusive or exclusive is the church. How much room does it have? And where's the line? Romans 10, 12 through 13. For there is no distinction between Jew and Greek, for the same Lord over all is rich to those who call upon him. For whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. It's hard to interpret that as anything other than grace being available to everybody. Whoever calls on the name of the Lord shall be saved. Apparently, if there's a cry in your heart, there is grace available to you. How many of you stuck around church last week for Italian Ice out back? Okay. Lots of you? Most of you? All right. Who was that Italian Ice for? It's for everybody. Yet, some did not avail themselves to the Italian Ice. Some chose not to. Some had places to go. Some left. Some attended but didn't have any. But just because they didn't ask for it doesn't mean it wasn't available to them. I can pretty much assure you that everybody that stood in line to get one of those was not disappointed. They were great. It looked great. It tasted great. It was for whoever called. That is the spirit of what they're saying here. It's for everyone. Does it mean everyone will avail themselves to it? No. In another passage, Paul is writing to Titus, and he's writing about how believers should behave. He gives direction to older men, to older women, to young women, to servants, to young men, and they're all in various ways are told to honor God with their lives. And then in chapter 2, he gives them the theological reason why. He says, I'm telling you to honor the Lord. It'll look different in different stages of your life. Chapter 2, he gets to tell them why in verse 11. For the grace of God that brings salvation has appeared to all men. The God that has expectations that you would live a certain way, the God that has expectations that you would live holy, then gives reasons as to why you would live holy, and it's not fear. He's not saying all of you live this way, or I'm coming after you and you're going to be punished. He's telling you to live this way because salvation has appeared to all men. The grace of God is on all of you. If God is intent on salvation appearing, at least as an option to all men, then it would seem that no man is in a state of being that can eliminate the opportunity for salvation. No one goes so far that they cannot receive grace when they ask. Next passage, Romans 1, 19 and 20. All of these talking about, is it inclusive, is it exclusive? Says, for what may be known of God, first of all, stop there. What may be known of God, meaning what we know of God is in limited capacity. Your capacity is limited, and you've only been taught so much. So you might know this much of a 180-degree field. But what might be known of God is manifest in them, for God has shown it to them. For since the creation of the world, his invisible attributes are clearly seen, being understood by the things that are made. God the Father works overtime so that at some level, some of who he is can be made known to you. That doesn't mean that everyone understands the fullness of the Godhead. But at some level, everyone has some level of witness of who he is. And of course, one last scripture is the classic one on the idea of salvation. The one that if you're sitting in the end zone, you hold up with a sign. John 3:16 and 17. For God so loved the world that he gave his only begotten Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have everlasting life. For God did not send his Son into the world to condemn the world, but that the world through him might be saved. The two most interesting words in the entire passage are whoever believes. It's whoever, the promise is for whoever, and then it's with the qualifier of whoever believes. The heart of God expressed through his Son Jesus is that everyone would have an opportunity to know him. That's inclusive. How many things are available to everyone in our city, let alone our state, let alone our nation or our world? He has and is going to the greatest lengths possible to offer grace to all. And we either believe it or we don't, but if we don't, that's at our own peril. Finally, actually, I'm going to give you one more passage here real quick. Jesus has been talking in this passage about going to prepare a place for them, and that they will come and be with him. And Thomas raises a gentle protest. He says, how are we supposed to come? We don't even know where you're going. You know, I think we're a little critical of Thomas. Thomas just asks the questions that the rest of you are wondering about. And he's like, Jesus, you're talking about going where? We don't know where you're going, and you're saying we're coming. Jesus replies to him in John 14:6. He says, I am the way. He's giving him instructions here. I am the way, the truth, and the life. No man comes to the Father but by me. So grace is for all, yet some are in and some are out. Italian ice is for everybody, but some of y'all didn't get some. What's the determining factor on who's in or who's out? Paul Hebert was a missiologist who taught at Fuller Seminary in probably the 80s. He was intrigued by this idea of who's in and who's out when grace is offered to everybody, and how different groups do church. And he said, how you view this idea determines how you do church. And he described two ways of groups forming. Now, it's getting a little wonky on you here. Just stick with me for a minute, okay? He said some groups are bounded sets, all right? A bounded set or group is defined by clear boundaries. Those boundaries might be rules or beliefs or behaviors, and those rules determine who's in and who's out. It's a bounded set. For instance, if you're wearing a blue shirt, raise your hand. All right, you are in the blue shirt club. If you thought about wearing a blue shirt, sorry, you're out. If you like blue, but your wife made you wear another color, sorry, you're out. They're rigid, distinct lines about what is in and what is out. The focus is on holding the line or the boundary that separates insiders from outsiders. Membership is about a bounded set. It might be specific doctrine, so everybody in that group thinks about things exactly the same way. It might be specific behaviors. It might be officially joining a church with membership. Once you are in, you are in. Unless you break the boundary, in which case you're back out. No matter what they say, a bounded set like this reinforces the idea of conformity. People tend to act and look and behave similarly because the set is defined by how they act and behave. A couple of classic, what we call bounded sets, obvious ones, would be like the military. If you're in the military, you wear that. You stand there. You do that. Nobody's kind of in the military. All right? Nobody's military-ish. You're either in or you're out. And if you are not behaving in a certain way, they will put you out. Another clearly bounded set would be the idea of like the Amish community would be a bounded set. Distinct rules. This is what it means to be Amish. You wear a Bass Pro hat to the barn raising in Jedediah, you're out. There are distinct rules of what it means to be that. Identity in a bounded set is maintained by distinguishing insiders from outsiders. In fact, the insiders need the outsiders because they signify who's in, because they're out there. Just like the cool kids in school need the nerds, because the nerds make the cool kids. All right, that's a bounded set. There's also a centered set. A centered set looks less like a cage of human beings and more like a tent with the sides rolled up, with everyone facing the center. And this membership is defined by relationship to that center point. That center point could be a mission, but in the church's situation, that center point is Jesus. And the question is not, are you in and out or outside of the boundaries? Are you behaving correctly? The question is, are you moving towards the center? Are you getting closer to him? There may be some that are very close to the center. Some might be on the fringe. But being in or out doesn't depend on crossing a line. It depends on you being on your journey to the center. Are you more like the center value? Are you more like Jesus than you were a year ago? That's the question of being a part of a centered set. People are valued not by how they act, but they are valued by how they orient their lives. Are they moving towards the center? Or are they ignoring it or even moving away? A centered set recognizes that people are on a journey. And it recognizes that they can be quite a distance away, but the turn of their heart towards the Lord makes them as valuable and as in as the person who's right next to the center of the pole of the tent. Now, a centered set is radically inclusive. Anybody can be a part of the community life just by turning towards the center, regardless of where they were when they decided to turn their hearts. Great example in the Bible would be, think of Paul on his way to murder Christians, suddenly having an experience with Jesus on the road to Damascus. His heart turns, and the disciples are a little torn here. Is he in or is he out? And some said, no, his heart is turned. He may not have walked with Jesus the way we did, but his heart is turned and he's definitely in. Identity is found in a person or a purpose rather than a rigid goal. A bounded set is about drawing lines. Are you inside or are you out? Some of you have been made to feel out of groups before. You knew where the line was. Everybody knew where the line was. And you were on the outside of that line. A centered set is about drawing people to the center. Are you moving towards the center or moving away from it? So, is the church, not just this congregation, but the church, is it a bounded set or a centered set? Let's see what Jesus had to say. At one point he said, "And I, if I'm lifted up from the earth, I will draw all people to myself." That sounds like a centered set. There he is on display, and he'll draw people to him. But then he also said, no man comes to the Father but by me. Oh, that sounds a little bit like a bounded set. Jesus was both radically inclusive and exclusive at the same time. He was inclusive in regards to who he issued grace to, who he offered it to. And yet he was exclusive in that he would not share his glory with another, and the only way to approach the Father is through the Son. Which is how we find ourselves 2,000 years later, when two major church leaders pass away, that might be surprised to find one another in heaven. In this series, Grace for All, and by the way, this has all been introduction. None of this actually counts towards preaching time. Okay, this is all the ramp up, okay? Just to be clear. In this series, I'm going to talk about how Jesus extended grace to some of the most unlikely groups of people who found themselves drawn to the center and then into the church. The only way to really see how far God extends grace is to look through the Gospels at the wide and wild variety of people that Jesus sought relationship with and set free. Jesus had no use for demographics. He just didn't. There was no group of people that Jesus felt uncomfortable with. There are groups of people you feel uncomfortable with. Doesn't make you a bad person, it makes you human. Okay? There are just certain situations where you are ill at ease. Jesus didn't struggle with any of that. He wasn't interested in demographics. He didn't struggle with that. And as a result, he did exactly what he told us he was going to do. He drew all people to him. And they came from every sort of situation. Here's how we're going to break it down the next few weeks. Next week, we're going to talk about people Jesus extending grace to those that are compromised. These are people who might feel like they've made a deal with the devil. Or they have done something that has put them in a situation where they are trapped and they can't get out of it. Jesus ministered to people who felt that they were compromised. Week after that, we're going to talk about Jesus extending grace to the weary and the wounded. There's something really dangerous to being fatigued. It is that you want to give up out of simple fatigue. And these are people who are about ready to give up, and Jesus extends grace to them. The last week, we're going to talk about people, and these are ones that maybe even have it harder than those that are compromised or those that are fatigued. These are the ones who actually have it together. There are people in your life who have it together and need Jesus as bad as the ones that are compromised. But because they have it together, at least on the surface, it's easy to think that maybe that they don't. So that's where we're going. But this week, we are talking about extending grace to people that are at the end of their rope. Now, here's the crazy part. Through the stages of your life, childhood, teen years, young adult, midlife, later in life, through all of these seasons of life, you will find yourself as every one of these people at some point, and at some of them, you'll find yourself in multiple groups at one time. If you're at the end of your rope, if you have made compromises that you feel like disqualify you, or you're weary, or you're wounded, or you've got it together, my pledge to you as a pastor and as a friend is that there is grace for you and for people like you. Here are the takeaways that I want you to carry away from this series. The first one is that Jesus has not given up on you, no matter your station in life. Like whatever category you identify with the most, Jesus is extending grace to you. You have not used it all up. Some of you think, I think I had 9 lives and I'm on number 11, and I don't know that the Lord has grace to deal with me anymore. He does. The second thing I want you to carry away with you is that he also extends grace to every person that you did not think had a prayer. Because some of us don't know if he has grace for us, and others of us don't think he has grace for those people. This is what I am not so subtly hoping for, is that as we talk about grace for us and for others, we realize how Jesus reached out to so many of us at the most unlikely of times, and we find a boldness for evangelism for our friends and neighbors that maybe we haven't verbalized it, but inwardly we've given up on. Evangelism is an uncomfortable word. I've got a friend that always says the only thing worse than doing evangelism is being evangelized. It just seems miserable at times. We've made it awkward. But there is grace for people in every situation. And as we see that, I'm believing that a boldness is going to come upon us when we realize what we've received and what he offers for other people. This week, talking about those that are desperate and downtrodden, those that are at the end of your rope. If you are sitting near someone at the end of the rope, nudge them, say, wake up, this is for you, okay? And internalize it as well. Being at the end of your rope might mean being out of patience. It might mean being out of money. It might mean being out of time. Whatever you need more of, you've got none. And you've tied a knot and you're hanging on. And that phrase is used for a lot, but for today's purposes, I'm talking about people who find themselves so out of options that they have accepted a life situation that others would look at and say, that's untenable. That's not possible. But they've kind of made peace with it because they don't know any other way out. Some people make peace with situations, I'm preaching to myself here as well, make peace with situations that they should make war with. And they just come to accept things as the way they are, and you're at the end of your rope. In the book of Mark, in the chapter before the one we're about to read, Jesus has been teaching. He gets on a boat for a ride across the Sea of Galilee. In the boat, he takes a nap. As he's napping, a storm starts to rage, and he calms the storm. And the disciples are just astonished at this. They say, literally, who is this man that the winds and waves obey him? Like, we've watched him heal people. We've watched him feed people. We did not anticipate this. They have watched him exercise his authority over nature himself and calming this violent storm, which is not going to hold a candle to what they're going to see when they get where they're going. Because even the storm in the boat was more familiar ground to what they're about to step into. They're crossing from Jewish territory on one side of the sea to Gentile territory on the other. It's the region of the Gadarenes. It was culturally unclean. It was a different world when you crossed the sea. There was the Decapolis region, which was, Decapolis means 10 cities. There are 10 cities on this side of the sea that are all very Greek in culture. Anybody who came from that side to this side would recognize, all right, there aren't Jewish customs over here. There aren't Jewish temples. There are Greek temples. It's a completely different world over here. To the point where, and we'll read about this in a minute, there's a herd of pigs over here you would not have found on the other side of the sea. The Jewish culture wouldn't have put up with it. And here they are. They know when they step off the boat, it's a completely different world. It's like getting off the plane in Las Vegas, right? That place is not normal. You can get off the plane and you've got to find a restroom. You don't find a restroom. You find slot machines everywhere until you find the restroom. And in the restroom, you find more slot machines. And you go, we're not in Kansas City anymore. This is different. This is what it would have been like for them. We read through this, and if you don't understand the geography, you don't realize what a different world they have stepped into. This is not familiar ground, okay? This is not going to your Chick-fil-A. This is a different spot. And the next encounter Jesus has is going to be with a man who is at the end of his rope or the end of his chains. He is living a life that I'm sure he never imagined for himself and that others are looking at and they're saying, how can you live that way? And he can't imagine life any different. In his mind, nothing's ever going to change. Matthew 5, 1 through 5. Mark, I'm sorry. They came to the other side of the sea, to the country of the Gadarenes. And when he had come out of the boat, immediately there met him out of the tombs a man with an unclean spirit, who had his dwelling among the tombs, and no one could bind him, not even with chains, because he had been bound, often bound with shackles and chains. In other words, they'd tried. They had tried to contain this man. But the chains had been pulled apart by him, and the shackles broken in pieces. Neither could anyone tame him. And always, night and day, he was in the mountains and in the tombs, crying out and cutting himself with stones. Here's a man who is clearly demon-possessed. He's isolated. He's living in the tombs or in the graveyard because no other place would tolerate him. Anywhere else he went, he caused such commotion, they forced him out into the tombs. The locals had tried to chain him, maybe for his own good, maybe out of fear, and maybe for their own safety, but the demons had regularly given him the strength to break these chains. But what happens next illustrates that people, even at the end of their rope, even demon-possessed, are spiritually sensitive to what is going on. They're not sedated. Some of you think that you have neighbors that are completely dead to spiritual things. Probably not true. They are probably more awake on the inside and sensitive. You're realizing this man is demon-possessed, and yet he's sensitive to what is going on because the darkness in him reacts to the light of Jesus. What must that have felt like to this demoniac to be in the presence of Jesus? Understand that when people are possessed or oppressed, they don't lose their humanity. They're not zombies. They're afflicted. Think of demon possession. It's spiritual, but think of it almost as a medical condition for a minute. Someone who has cancer is not cancer. Does that make sense? It afflicts them, but it's not their identity. You wouldn't go to the oncology department, high five, and say, hey there, cancer. That's horribly offensive. Why? Because that's not who they are. It's what they have. He is not a demon. He is possessed by a demon. He has a demon, but he's a human being. I think some people actually dismiss the work of the demonic realm in their life because they're still functioning at some level. Well, I still sense the Holy Spirit. I worship in church. I'm not saying that those people are possessed, but I'm saying the enemy can be afflicting them, and just because they sense the presence of the Lord doesn't negate the oppression of the enemy at the same time. This guy's demon-possessed, and yet he responds to the presence of Jesus. If you're confessing Jesus, just a little clarity here, if you're confessing Jesus as your Savior, you may be oppressed, you're not possessed. There's not room enough in you for both the enemy and Jesus, okay? But you can still be deeply oppressed. In fact, the activity of the enemy rages against you at some level at different times of your life. Maybe from the moment you woke up this morning, you felt like something was pressing back. You were worried yesterday. You went to bed worried. You woke up worried. Don't negate the role of the enemy messing with you like that just because you can walk in and lift your hands and sing. 1 Peter 5, 8 and 9. Be sober and vigilant, because your adversary, the devil, walks about like a roaring lion, seeking who he may devour. Resist him, steadfast in the faith, knowing the same sufferings are experienced by your brotherhood in the world. In other words, at some level, we all face some pushback from the dark side or from the enemy. The difference between any of us and the demoniac is not as great as we wish it were. Because all of us, unbelievers and believers, face the wrath of the enemy that would want to stop you and settle you away from who Jesus is. He will chain you to the tomb if he needs to, but if there's an easier way, he'll chain you to your own misgivings or to your own fear or to your own insecurity. Jesus came for people at the end of their rope, and he comes for this demoniac. Listen to how King David spoke about the oppression that he faced on a regular basis. And he's not describing a specialized situation here. He's describing real life, paying the mortgage, paying the utilities, disciplining the kids, getting everybody where they need to be, understanding the national situation, living out his mandate before the Lord. He says this in Psalm 143, 3 and 4. For the enemy has persecuted my soul. He has crushed my life to the ground. He has made me dwell in darkness, like those who have been long dead. Therefore my spirit is overwhelmed within me. My heart's in great distress. This is David, a man after God's own heart, saying, there are days, and maybe more days than he wanted to admit, that he felt like the weight of hell was pressing against him. David even was at the end of his rope at times. And so was the demoniac. So let's go back to that story for a second and see what happens. Mark 5, 6, and 7. When he saw Jesus from afar, he ran and he worshipped him. And he cried out with a loud voice, what have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High God? I implore you by God that you do not torment me. Now it gets a little confusing here. Leave that verse up. It gets a little confusing because in this short little passage, there's three characters, okay? There is Jesus, who's come from afar. There is the natural man at the end of his rope, the human being, and the demon. All right, so there's three characters, and it's important to understand the man is drawn to Jesus, and even to worship, he comes ready to recognize who Jesus is. He has a demon, he is not a demon. So at the beginning of the passage, the man attempts to worship, and then we hear the voice of the demon. People at the end of their rope, you included, are more than just your circumstances. Don't let the circumstances stop you from responding when you sense the presence of the Lord. Don't reduce yourself to the thing that is happening to you right now. You are more than that. Some of you are struggling in different areas, and it is so real and so overpowering that you have come to identify with the struggle rather than your calling. Some of you are struggling financially, and you say things like, "We're poor." And in doing so, you define yourself by the thing that is afflicting you. Heard a comic say one time that as a kid, in frustration because they never had any money, he muttered, he said, "I said it in front of my dad. I didn't say it to him, but I said it so he could hear me." He said, "I hate being poor." And his dad came to him and said, "Son, never say you're poor. Poor is a state of mind, and some people never find their way out of it. You're not poor, son. You're broke." Broke is circumstantial, right? You can fix broke. It's a subtle difference. But your identity is not the thing that is afflicting you. This man had a demon, but he was still a man. And his spirit responded to the presence of Jesus. Even with the demon tormenting him, when he came into the presence of God, he wanted to worship. The demon, on the other hand, had other fish to fry. And he says, "What have I to do with you, Jesus, Son of the Most High? I implore you by God that you do not torment me." And Jesus wastes no time. Jesus moves quickly to those at the end of their rope. Even in this room, some of you you're like, "I don't think I'm possessed." I don't think you are either. He said, "I don't think I'm possessed, but I'm at the end of my rope." Jesus moves eagerly and quickly to meet you there. He wastes no time. Mark 5, 7, and 9. For he said to him, "Come out of the man, unclean spirit." Then he asked him, "What is your name?" And he answered him, the demon speaking here, saying, "My name is Legion, for we are many." Now the significance of this here is Jesus' confrontation with this legion showcases his complete authority over everything that makes you feel like you're at the end of your rope. If he can confront a legion of demons, he can confront the reason that you feel like you're at the end of your rope. Like, relatively more easily than this, okay? It also emphasizes that the darkest spiritual forces are still submissive to Jesus. Jesus, though warring with Satan, is not warring with an equal. He's warring with a defeated one. And Jesus demonstrates that here. And it demonstrates that nobody is beyond rescue. If Jesus can set a demoniac, chained, living in the tombs, free in a moment, he can meet you where you are. Now we know the story. Jesus casts the demons out, and he sends them into a herd of pigs, the same herd of pigs that served as a sign that they were not in Jewish territory anymore. And the pigs race down the hill into the water, and they all drown. Now, it's a kind of a peculiar aside. It's what most people remember about this story, is the weird thing that happened with the pigs. But it's just Jesus putting an exclamation point on their ungodliness here. He's pointing out the distinctions that will be their undoing. He's not only am I getting rid of these demons, I'm actually getting rid of your pigs. The far more important thing of the story is what happens to the man. The mass pig slaughter was just punctuation. The sentence that Jesus was writing was about setting this man free. Even if you see miraculous breakthrough in a situation that has you at the end of your rope, what feels like the miracle, honestly, is just the punctuation. God is not consumed with your breakthrough, although he wants to give you breakthrough. He is consumed with drawing you to him. And the locals, when this happens, become a little unhinged. And we don't exactly know why. Some people think it's because of the big bacon drop. Like he's done this thing that cost them a lot of money. And that's why they get angry. Some believe it's because this man that they had come to identify with his demons is now free, and they don't know what to do with him. They knew where to put this guy before. Chain him in the catacombs, put him in the graveyard. He's out of sight, out of mind. Oh, wait, he's better now? That's the weird thing about freedom. There are some in your life who are more comfortable with you being bound. Because bound, you're a known quantity. Some of you are in elliptical circulation with a family member, and it's dysfunction. And you both have the same gravitational field, and you fuel one another. And if you get free, this person doesn't know what to do. Because they were kind of counting on you. It's a codependency. There are people that don't know what to do when you get set free. Because you respond differently than you did before. And they were counting, you know what? It's like, well, do we want them to be free? Well, yeah, but we kind of got used to them being bound. At least we knew how they were going to act. Mark 5:15. Then they came to Jesus and saw the one who had been demon-possessed and had the legion sitting there, clothed in his right mind. It's like the pinnacle of mixed emotions. He's got clothes on, that's good. But he's not how we remember him. And our pigs are gone. When a person at the end of their rope finds freedom, sometimes the friends don't know what to do with him. So between the pig episode and the man at the end of his rope who's suddenly free, the people begin to demand that Jesus leave. They want him out of there. And Jesus obliged. Nowadays, some people would, if they're asked to leave a place, they would sue for their civil rights. Jesus doesn't sue. He's just like, all right, I'll go where I'm wanted. And I'm clearly not wanted here, although the man sitting here clothed in his right mind might feel differently. In Mark 5:18-20, when he got in the boat, he who had been demon-possessed, I love how they continue to refer to him, he who had been, he's like, can we move on? Can we not continually reflect on what had been? He who had been demon-possessed begged Jesus, that he might go with him. However, Jesus didn't permit him, but he said to him, go home to your friends and tell them what great things the Lord has done for you and how he had compassion on you. And he departed and he began to proclaim in Decapolis all the things that Jesus had done for him, and all marveled. If what Jesus said about there being grace for all is true, then there is grace for people in circumstances so dark that it becomes their identity. And he wants to set them free. Now, I've got good news for you, and I have bad news. The good news is you don't have to be demon-possessed to be the end of your rope. It doesn't have to be that bad. Just because you're at the end of your rope doesn't mean there's a demon involved. The bad news is many of you are still at the end of your rope. And that is all that you think of yourself, and you are nearly as bound as the one in the tombs. I'm here to tell you Jesus has grace for you, and he wants to accentuate who you are in relation to him, not who you are in relation to your problem or whatever has you bound. This is the centered set of what it means to be a part of the church. That when you turn your heart towards him, he lavishes you with grace that is available to everyone. Even at Jesus' own darkest moment, when he's on the cross, if there would ever have been an opportunity for him to go, I kind of got my hands full here. When one of the thieves turns to him with even the slightest turn of his heart, Jesus has compassion on him. That's how drawn he is to people at the end of their rope. I don't know what rope you're at the end of this morning. Maybe it's circumstances, finances, housing, a job. You're stuck. You just don't see a way forward. Maybe it's relational. You've been hurt or you've hurt somebody and you don't know how to fix this. Maybe it really is completely spiritual. You're just dry on the inside. Let me assure you, there is grace for people at the end of their rope, and they are not defined by that which afflicts them. You are more than the circumstances. You're more than the struggle. There is grace for you. And I want to just ask this morning for grace to be poured out over those that are at the end of their rope. You're discouraged. You don't see a way forward. I'm including myself in my own sermon here. There are areas that I'm going, I don't know. And I'm counting on the word being true, and there being grace for everyone, and Jesus being drawn to people in these situations, and not being defined by the situation myself, that he's got more for me and for you. Let's bow our heads for just a moment. Holy Spirit, we study extremes this morning as we talk about the demon-possessed. But now we turn and we apply it to our own hearts. And there are some of us who are at the end of our rope, and we don't know even what a way forward would be. And we pray, just as you were drawn to the demoniac, that you would be drawn to us. And just as you saw him as a man and not a demon, that you would see us in our humanity and not just our circumstances. We don't want to identify with the portion of that man who desperately wanted to worship. Holy Spirit, come now. We stand before you broken, confused, at the end of our rope. And yet when we turn our heart towards you in a moment, you meet us there. We're crying out that you'd meet us, Jesus. You'd give us strength. You'd set us free. I want to take just a moment this morning, do one more thing. I want to ask if we could maybe just kill the web stream here for a second.